Welcome back. So this is the first flight with the new engine, the new turbo, changed out oil color in the redrive, and probably a few other little things that have been changed. So yeah, I've done a bunch of testing, obviously ground testing before this, and was comfortable that everything was performing as well as it could for the testing that I can do on the ground. So time to get it up in the air. And I think I retracted the gear a little bit too early, and it's, it only retracts when you get an indicated airspeed of around about 85 or 90 knots. And maybe for some reason it was a little higher or something like that, but it didn't retract when I first did it. So a little bit further along I retracted it just as I was turning out here. And then I had called the tower and asked them to just check that it was up and down. And so everything was okay with that in the end. But I was a bit rusty because it'd been 2 months since I'd flown. It wasn't, the last time I flew wasn't in the Raptor, it was in a Tiger, which was a couple of days after the last flight of the Raptor. So a little bit further along here, I'm just monitoring everything, and there wasn't any problems at this point. So just keeping an eye on my low oil light, my oil pressures, and obviously temps and everything else like that. And wasn't having anything that was an obvious problem at this point. And so I planned for this flight to be long enough to just basically check everything and make sure that I didn't have any problems. And one of the things I was noticing was I was getting my low oil light flickering on every now and then, and I think I didn't have quite enough oil in the sump. This is not like a set place that I actually have to put it at. It's up to me to decide how much extra oil to put in the sump to compensate for how much oil that the redrive is using. And with that new with a new oil color in there, it's still sort of it's to be determined exactly how well that's working and how much oil pressure that's holding. So I was basically thinking, oh, maybe it's not holding quite as good pressure as the old one, but I wasn't seeing anything that was that I'd consider was a problem. So just comfortably just flying along. And I guess that the oil got to a certain temperature here that things started to change a little bit. I ended up getting the low oil light coming on, so I'd had that protocol in place in my mind, for what I needed to do. So immediately pulled the power back somewhat and flattened the prop out, and called tower and asked them if I could just basically land on 17, which the wind wasn't favouring that, but that's where I was. I was on a left base, or a left downwind for 17, and they basically cleared me to land there. And then, of course, a couple of seconds later, after I'd flattened out the prop, the low oil light went back off because the oil basically went back into the sump. So anyway, at this point, they already cleared me to land. I didn't want to sort of fuss with it and whatever, and I figured it was a good time now to check everything anyway. So better to be on the ground wishing to be in the air than the other way. So I just continued the approach and just did a fairly normal landing on 17, as you'll see. And while we were waiting for that landing, so the other thing I did take notice of, and you can see here looking at the instrumentation, that the static port and the pitot tube are giving me pretty accurate indications right now. The airspeed is within a couple of knots of ground speed, and the indicated wind is much more accurate now. So I'm just going to leave that static port the way it is. I think that's the best that I've seen so far. It's a little bit erroneous when you're on the runway, and I think that's just because of the pressure differential of the air underneath the aircraft in ground effect. But for the rest of it, it seems like when it's in the air, it's much more accurate. So I'll just live with that for right now, for that positioning of that. And I'm landing here with about a 5 or 6 knot tailwind. So I think it's the first time I've had to do that. Alright, so that's the first flight, and I put some more oil in it. And the other thing I did too while I was waiting to do the next flight was I changed out the redrive belts. One of the belts was rubbing slightly on the lip of the cowling and it damaged it a little bit. So anyway, I changed those out and I was ready for the second flight.
Raptor 352 Tango Delta, runway 35, clear for takeoff, eastbound departure approved. Use caution, vehicles last 3,000 feet, right side, runway 35.
Yeah, runway 35, clear for takeoff, east turnout approved. I'll watch out for the vehicles, 352 Tango Delta.
Alright, so second flight, some more oil added to the sump and new redrive belts.
Approaching runway 35. Entered runway 35, 7,900 feet remaining.
And it was a bit windy. This was this morning. The wind was 070 at 10 with peak gusts at 19. As you'll see, the windsock just there off to the left. So yeah, a little bit of crosswind correction for the departure, but nothing really that much. I mean, the aircraft's heavy enough; it doesn't have too much problems handling those sort of gusty wind conditions. And I've got enough rudder authority to handle that once I get up to about 20 knots. So yeah, not a problem on the departure this time. Everything was smooth. And got the gear up nicely this time at the right appropriate time without any problems. And so my goal this time was going to be to just go full power here for the initial takeoff and then back off the power to like 75% and try and prevent the engine from heat soaking. Those temperatures there, the ones on the right hand side, those were just basically air temperatures inside the cowling. I was just monitoring how much heat there was there by the Y pipes and also how much heat was going out the back via the spinner there. And that's mainly for me to see if there can be any improvements made for airflow under the cowling there, because I was a bit concerned that there's heat build up around the redrive now that I've got those vents open on the side, and you'll see I've got a larger lip now on the cowling there around the spinner in order to draw more air. It seems to be working okay, but obviously airflow is something that you can keep tweaking forever and make slight improvements. So I circled around for a while and it was a little bit bumpy down low, as you can imagine with those sort of winds blowing, but once I got up to about 3,000 feet it smoothed out quite a bit and was quite comfortable actually. So as you can see here, just zipping along, not too many problems, and temperatures were staying low. You'll see in a minute here at the end of this, I'll show you the engine log there. The temperatures were actually staying really good at this point, so I was pretty happy about that. And yeah, it was a nice day out, obviously. I wasn't having any real problems per se, so it's taken a while to get back in the air, but I've had to change a lot of things. Anyway, so just zipping around for a little while. And I was noticing I was occasionally getting the low oil light coming on just briefly, just for a second, and then going off again. So potentially a little bit more oil needed in there, but I'm kind of thinking more towards the point that this never used to do this with the other oil collar in there, the steel one. So there's obviously not quite as tight tolerance on this one. And potentially what is happening, and what my thoughts are now, is that it's obviously not as tight as the other one because it's more oil's running through it, and that's what's bringing the low oil light on the sump. You can see there the temps inside the fuselage, inside the cowling and stuff, were a little high there around where the Y pipe is, but nothing that I can't sort of redirect a little bit more air around through there and out the back to cool things down. Anyway, so what my thinking is with the oil is that potentially I'm running too light of a weight oil here, because I'm running 5W30 right now, and I believe I used to run 5W40. So I'm talking to a few different people to get a recommendation on what oil I should be running there. I think if I go to a 10W40, I'll be better off, because the oil seems to be a little bit too thin because I'm running it at high power most of the time, or all of the time. And subsequently it's too thin, and so it can go through that oil collar too quickly, and then that creates a problem in that the governor won't hold the prop or the RPM down enough, so the engine's spinning faster than it needs to be by about 100 RPM, and that's adding to the heat. And on top of that, then I'm getting the low oil light indication just because there's so much oil being drawn so quickly from the sump. So anyway, that's what my thoughts are right now, switching up the oil to a more high temp oil. So I just continue to circle around a little bit more. It's still climbing, but just sort of taking it easy. I have that engine back at about 70% throttle, and temperatures were staying. Oil temp was only about 230, which was really good. Coolant temp was like 185. And then I noticed that all of a sudden, and not like dramatically, but the temperature started to climb again. And so I was sort of reducing power, thinking, well, this is weird. Why is it climbing? I haven't done anything different. The only thing I did turn off, I turned off the intercooler that has the fuel running through it, but that would only increase the intake temperatures by maybe 10 degrees at this point. And you can actually see that in the logs. So at that point, I was like, well, it's why are my oil temps going up? I think I'm going to head back and land and just see what's going on, why it's going up. And at this point, I'm really starting to think about the oil itself, because everything was fine, and then all of a sudden, temperatures start to climb for no reason. And I was thinking all the oils maybe hit like a sort of a temperature there where it starts to get really thin, and then it's not absorbing heat, and there's too much friction in the engine, all sorts of stuff going on, and then things start to sort of increase in temperature. And then on top of all that, because I got the new redrive belts on there, I'd set the tensioner up on those, but I think they kind of bedded in after this flight, and I actually had them jump just briefly. So at that point I was like, all right, I'm going to call a tower and get back on the ground.
Belt Office Raptor 352 Tango Delta. I'd like to return to the field if I can. And given the way the winds work, do you mind if I land on 4?
Raptor 2 Tango Delta, runway 4 is approved. Enter the left downwind for runway 4, report midfield.
It'll be a right downwind for runway 4 because I'm over to the south right now, and I'll report at midfield 2 Tango Delta.
Raptor 2 Tango Delta, roger. Right downwind for runway 4.
Right downwind for runway 4, 2 Tango Delta.
And so around about the same time, the low oil light was sort of coming on more. It was still going off again. So it just made me think that the oil has just got to a certain temperature now where it's gotten thinner and thinner, and it's running through that redrive just more quickly, and subsequently pulling down the oil level, because the amount of oil that I have in there now is basically the same as I was running on the previous engine and also with the previous oil collar in there. But for whatever reason, it's just not holding the pressure as much, and obviously, a different oil collar in there, the bronze one. But I think if I go to a heavier weight oil, as I said, a 1040 or something like that, then potentially the oil's going to stay thicker at these higher temperatures, and then the governor is going to work better. So at least that's what's my thinking. And as I said, I'm talking to a couple of different people and getting some opinions and stuff on this. And obviously, if I'd step up to a 1040, it's not going to cause any problems. And if that improves things, but not quite enough, then I could potentially go to a 2050 if I can, see if that's approved for this engine. But I know a 1040 is totally approved for this engine.
For runway 4.
After 2 Tango Delta, runway 4, clear to land.
And runway 4, clear to land, 2 Tango Delta.
After 2 Tango Delta, wind 050 at 9, gust 16.
Copy, 2 Tango Delta.
And those who are listening closely would have realised that there I made a mistake and I actually called a right midfield when I should be calling a right base, but anyway. So that's what's going on with the oil. I think I'm going to just look for a 10W40. And the other thing that I wanted to let you know is I'm really burnt out on doing these videos. As you can see from the last few, I've just basically been phoning them in. It's just so much work to do this, and especially when I go flying, and then it takes hours to edit up one of these, and then it's really time better spent. I should be right now figuring out what oil I'm going to put in here, not telling you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take a break from making the videos for a while and just focus on getting the remaining hours flown off of this. I've got about 29 hours to do now. So I won't be putting out any more videos unless anything really interesting comes up, but if it's just more of the same of what I'm doing here, I'm just not going to do the videos until I get the hours done. And then when it comes time and I'm ready to transport the aircraft across to the west coast, then I'll probably video all that and make a little bit of a series out of that, because I'm sure that'll be interesting for everybody to see that happening. And the plans of what I have for production, where I'm working with these guys on the west coast, and the plans we have to do, I guarantee you, for whatever you're thinking my production plans are going to be, it's not that. We have some interesting plans for what we're going to be doing, and some interesting changes to the aircraft to improve a bunch of things, but I can't reveal anything yet, and probably I won't be the one revealing it, because it'll be the new company doing that. So that's basically what's going on with the plans going forward. So I'll give you a look here in a second at the engine logs to see how this temperatures and stuff were. But yeah, unfortunately I won't be putting out any more new videos for a while. I'm just burnt out from it. I've been doing it for 6 years now, and 2 videos a week, and then recently just 1 video a week, and it's just too much. And of course I don't even make any money off of this. The YouTube revenue on this is just not even worth my time. So all right, let's go ahead and look at the output here from the engine logs, and then we'll call it a video. All right, here's the engine logs for this flight. So if I just sort of zoom in a little bit here. So this is basically the takeoff here, and you see it wasn't long that I basically took it off of 100% throttle and just brought it right back to 75. I just wanted to see what it did when I did that, just to see how well the temps maintain. And then you can see the engine oil temperature here, this dark blue one, 199 there when I did that. And then the coolant temperature is only 72 because I got that front loop running with plenty cold coolant, which I turned on just as I was rolling down the runway. There you can see right there is where I turned it on, and the temperature drops down. And of course I've got the thermostat opening up now and the fan coming on early and all that good stuff. So I pulled the prop back as well, so I had 3,000 RPM up here, you can see on the prop. And oil temps here, 213, so it was very, very stable and almost flat, like 222 here. And keep in mind that the thermostat for the oil opens up at 219, that's where it tries to keep the oil temperature. And so coolant temperature here is rising up, not dramatically, but it's rising up. And up here, we've got oil temp at 226 and almost basically stable here. And same with the coolant temperature, 182 here. So, I mean, this is really where I want to be. And, it looked like here everything was, leveled out and fairly stable. I mean, maybe the coolant temperature was still rising a little bit, but nothing sort of dramatic. And then right about here, you see I've got 184 and then 228. I mean, just ideal temperatures there, and I've still got 70% throttle, 3,000 RPM. And, if the governor was working a little bit better, that might be like, 2,900 and change, but it's only off by, maybe 50 RPM of what it could be, I think. And then all of a sudden here, you see things start to sort of change, and the oil temp here starts to increase. And of course, because of it, and a little bit lagging behind it, it just starts driving the coolant temperature up. And nothing else changed. I kept the same RPM, same throttle, same fuel. Everything was basically the same. Even the EGTs here were basically saying the same. They might have gone up a little bit here. You can see, 1246 on the first turbo, and 1276. So I went up 30 degrees, and I don't think that is enough to account for this increase in the oil temp here. So we've gone from 228, and it just keeps climbing and climbing. And then I see what's happening. I've got 234, and I see it still going. And so now I start to come back on the throttle a little bit, 68%, and then 66%, and then ultimately, down to 63%. And it's still, it starts to level off there at 238. But, the only other thing that changed was you can see, let's see, where is it? Right there is where I turn off the fuel intercooler, the one that has the fuel running through it. And, that sends the intake air temperatures up a little higher. So it was 165, and it starts to send it up to 190. So potentially that's adding some more thing, and I could have probably left that on. And maybe that's all it was that was causing that. But up until then, everything was looking great in terms of the temperatures here. If I could keep it here at 230 or 228 degrees oil temperature and 185 on the coolant, and fly around there all day long. The only other thing that I noticed a change is the outside air temperature went up a little bit too, and you can see it from the ambient temperature here. So that this is under the cowling, just coming out of the radiator there, 95 degrees, which is nice and cool. And then that starts to creep up and comes up to 110. So that goes up 15 degrees, and maybe that has something to do with it as well. But anyway, up until here, everything was great. So I think potentially changing to a different oil that's more high performance oil for higher temps and stuff is not going to hurt doing this. So that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, that's going to be my update. Thanks again for watching, and I guess tune in again when I put out something new, when I have something really interesting to show. Otherwise, if you want to follow what I'm doing, you can actually see my flights show up on FlightAware. If you put my tail number in there, and you can get notifications and stuff from that. So thanks again, and we'll catch you whenever it is that I put out the next one. Cheers.